Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast. Today, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Bill Brady.
I've never had an introduction quite like that.
That sounded really good,
like
though.
It. I like it.
I think you will record that and give it to you, and you can use it on all of your social media and
Please.
things like that. Good job, Cory. I like that. Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast, everyone. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore.
Bill Brady is with us today, obviously. Bill has been a friend of both Cory and mine for probably a decade or so. We met each other networking back in the day as we crossed paths. Bill was always somebody that just we had experiences together and some specific stories that I just remember liking Bill as a guy and as a person and as a friend. We've been able to stay somewhat in touch over the last 10 years, and he has done quite a number of amazing things in the last 10 years, and we'll let him talk about a couple of those things. But he's one of the owners and CEO of Troomi Wireless. And as many of us have kids in that age group of needing or wanting some technology in their life, Bill's going to bring a really interesting, great perspective to healthy technology habits and why he founded Troomi Wireless. And it's just going to be an amazing conversation today. So welcome to the podcast, Bill.
Hey, thank you so much. Really excited to be with both of you.
So we had Bill scheduled to be on the podcast though a little while ago, and he got really sick with COVID and lost his voice entirely.
It's almost back all the way.
It's almost back. So we're glad that you're with us finally, and that your voice sounds amazing. So
thank you. Not quite like Cory's.
Sam Elliott might, put a little bit of competition up against Cory's voice on a podcast.
Actually, it's not even close. He would murder me. I always tell Kirk, hey, can you make me sound like Sam Elliott? That would be awesome. But he never has.
I don't know. I think it sounds pretty good.
So Bill, maybe to start, talk to us about, since you're in this technology space and a space where you're providing technology to kids in a safe way, tell us that story and tell us what you've learned and what you've taught your kids through this process.
Yeah. Great question.
Very open-ended, long answered question.
The genesis of this whole thing kind of comes from a couple of directions. On one hand, over my whole career, and my career's been in marketing and communication, and even going back to, 2000, year 2000, or even 1998, 1999, when I was a student at BYU, in studying communication, I was concerned about the effect of technology on how we communicate as humans. And picture that, guys. Like, this is before smartphones. This is before social media. Even going back that long, I've felt like this dehumanizing effect of technology, and I was always concerned about it. And that was dramatically amplified as I became a dad. And as my wife and I were deciding, how are we going to do technology in our home? Are we going to do video games? Or are we not going to do video games? Are kids going to have phones? Or are they not going to have phones, et cetera, et cetera? Just because of some of that background, we've always been a little bit cautious and contemplative, not ever saying that technology is evil and there's no place for it. Certainly not to that extreme, but just, hey, let's just be deliberate, perhaps is the right word. A few years ago, back to 2018, I had the opportunity to get into this space of kids and technology and looking for a better way to introduce technology to kids. I've learned over these years that these questions about kids and technology and when and what and how much, these are questions that every family in America is dealing with. Some because they've heard other people's stories and they've said, whoa, we better be careful and really look at this. And frankly, in some very tragic cases, because families have experienced some pretty tough problems. Since I've been in this space, everyone wants to tell me their stories. And some of them literally bring tears to my eyes when I hear what kids have gone through and what families have gone through as a result because of some pretty rough situations kids have gotten into. Now, those are the outlier stories. Not every family is going to deal with some of those extreme cases that involve the worst things you can imagine. But every family can imagine the struggle that happens between kids and parents and boundaries when it comes to technology. And most parents are just tired of that. And then a lot of families have experienced the changes that happen in kids because of too much social media, for example, or screen addiction, for example, where it's this stress, anxiety, even depression that results. So it's become my mission, my life's work, if you will, to provide a better way for parents to provide technology to their kids in a way that harnesses the good of technology, because kids are all going to use technology as they get older. And frankly, they need technology for school, for work, to discover their passions and enjoy their hobbies. Like, technology is part of our lives, but we want to get them away from the inappropriate content, the cyberbullying, the predators, that stress, anxiety, and depression that come from social media. That's really been our goal.
If you're not familiar with what Troomi Wireless is, it's a phone. It's a Samsung phone. It looks like a normal smartphone, right? And it functions like a normal smartphone, except for the parent, it has the ability to decide what apps go on the phone and also who the contacts are on the phone. And the kid can send a request and then you approve it, like in the parent portal. You can see the texts. You can see how many texts. You can see how many phone calls they've made, how long they've been on the phone, how many blocked calls and how many blocked text messages from blocked numbers have come in. It's quite a cool back end for a parent to be able to see the habits of what the kids are going and doing on their phones. I'm a customer of Troomi. Actually, a funny story. So I ordered some Troomi phones and then Bill texts me, I just got an order from Kirk Chugg for 2 phones. How you doing? And I was like, wow, that's customer service when the CEO sees your order and texts you. But these phones have been really good because we started with some that were, very basic text and call phones, which is exactly what we needed at the time. But my 14-year-old boys needed a little bit more of an introduction to some technology. So they can use some of the reading apps, some of the school apps, some of the things that are used and encouraged to be used in schools, maps, technologies, tracking. We use like Life 360 to see where the family is. And all of those types of apps are available with Troomi. And I don't have to worry about, like, I can turn Google on or I can turn Google off. And I like that. Like, when they're ready for that, I can turn that on and kind of monitor what they're doing. So just for a little bit of a background, if you haven't yet heard of Troomi Wireless, I want to give you a background of what types of phones these are, but the kids like them because they look like they're regular smartphones, right?
They have phenomenal cameras and take great pictures.
They do.
You hit on a really important point there, that you wanted your boys to have the resources they needed to progress, to learn, to grow. And that's really what we set out to do, was to create an operating system. I mean, it's really the operating system that's our product. And we spent a year building it. And it's built in a way that you can cater that phone environment to an 8-year-old. So they have just talk and text, for example, or to a 14 or 15-year-old that needs apps for school and does need some access to the internet. So it's really the phone that grows with your kids, is what we call it. And it's been super, super well received by the families who use it.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point too. Sometimes the sticky point is not necessarily the technology. It is the fight between the parent and the kid about what's appropriate and when it's appropriate, because there are some kids that just have, leash off. They have a smartphone when they're 8 and it has access to absolutely everything. And they see that and they say, well, my friends have all got these other phones. And then it kind of creates strife between the parent and the kid. And that's been an issue at my house. And Troomi's helped with that, moving them in the direction of unrestricted smartphone. But it gives me the opportunity to talk to them about their habits too, because I can see the rolling 7-day average of how many texts they send. That's alarming. That's alarming.
Well, you've got boys. I've got teenage girls, and I guarantee my number's more alarming.
I don't know.
He has one teenage girl too, so he knows what you're talking about. My teenage girl, it's alarming for sure how many texts are out. So how does this go with your kids? Were they the guinea pigs for the phone? And did they help you determine how it was going to work and,
Yeah.
what they needed and didn't need and all that?
As a family, our first guinea pig was my oldest daughter. She'll be 18 next month. But when she was 12 and starting to babysit, it was clear that she needed something. And like a lot of families in America, we had cut the cord. We didn't have a home phone per se. And so that meant when, Becca was going to go babysit at someone's house, she needed a phone. And so her first phone was a flip phone and worked great. Flip phones have become harder and harder to get. As Becca matured, we did go the iPhone route, and it was just hard to manage, hard to stay on top of. But that's been her experience, and we created a lockdown experience there, and she handled it fairly well. There are other stories where people get around some of those controls, and it doesn't go as well. Thank goodness with us and Becca it did. With my next kids, though, just even from experiences that we'd had with Becca, I had decided to delay that first cell phone more. Right around the time that our second daughter was 12, I gave her one of these other devices on the market that's very locked down to talk and text only. And initially she was excited. She got her first phone. It's the rite of passage. But within 30 days, she never had it with her. I mean, ever. It sat on the kitchen counter as decor. Mm-hmm. And so I pulled her aside and I said, "Hey, Jenna, give me some feedback here. I thought you were excited about getting a phone. Why don't you ever have it with you?" And her feedback was really enlightening. Some of the things that she said, number one, she said, "Dad, I love photography. It's my number one hobby, and the camera quality here is so poor that I can't do anything with the pictures. I'd like to have an app for graphic design. I would like to have the apps I need for school." Like, she's required to use Canvas and Skyward. There are times that I need access to the web, to even a safe browser where a parent can control, the websites. That's what we do with Troomi. And it was clear that, there had to be a better approach. And kind of in the existing landscape, there was the approach of, hey, give your kid a $1,300 iPhone that can do anything and everything. And we're learning as a society that's not safe. It's not a smart way to start. On the other end of the spectrum, it was something that's so locked down that it's really impractical for the kid, and as a result, impractical for the parents, not really meeting that family's needs. That was the genesis of this vision to create something that would grow with the child, help them meet their needs. So yeah, my daughter Jenna, in that experience where she gave me that feedback, that was pivotal to building what we built. And on top of that initial feedback from her, it was interviews with hundreds of parents. It was a nationwide market research study with 800 moms. And we got a lot of input into what should go into this operating system that we were building.
So how old are your kids now?
I've got 5. My first 3 are girls, and they are almost 18, 15, and 12. And then I've got 2 little guys who are 9 and almost 6. The little guys, all they want to do is camp and shoot BB guns and have campfires. I'm going to keep it that way as long as possible.
Yeah, amen.
Love it. I love that time with them. And with the girls, we've tried to have that very, graduated, intentional approach with technology, as opposed to just saying, "Here you go, have at it."
So you are obviously more than just a technology phone guy. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was because of your experience with this, but also because of, I know, the type of intentional father you are. So talk to us about some of the lessons that you're trying to teach your kids right now and how you're doing it.
Oh, I love that. So with all my kids, we're trying to teach them, and I say we, because my wife is, every bit as much a part of this learning process. She's incredible. Her name's Heidi. We're trying to teach them that people are more important than devices, that there's nothing that matches in this world a real human relationship, that, if you're going to love somebody, serve somebody, really have a bond with somebody, that does not happen with a device. There are cases where a device can supplement that, but that's not where it happens. And devices are never more important than people, ever. It was kind of one of those little epiphany moments. A few years ago, my wife's family was in town, and hadn't seen her siblings for a while, and we were having a nice visit. And at one point, I look around the living room, and everyone's on a device. And I was like, "What are we doing? Like, no, put the devices down. Like, if you're going to be here for a visit, let's have a visit." Again, you just fall into that because it's so normal. We always have these things with us, and so we're really trying to teach the kids to be intentional. Let the device be a tool, not a lifestyle. Let's be outside. Let's be active. Let's be enjoying everything the world has for us, not just cooped up in, our rooms with devices. That's not living.
Do you guys have things you do as a family that help you connect? Are there traditions or things that you do on an ongoing basis that help you have that interconnection inside your own family?
When it comes to technology, we definitely have some rules. So for example, no devices at the dinner table. We want to keep dinner time as family time, and we try to be as consistent with family dinner as possible. And that's hard. It's hard with all the places kids have to be and part-time jobs and sports, but we really try to make that a priority. On Sundays, we try to put devices away and just play board games and hang out. That's really positive. We keep devices out of bedrooms. So all the devices go to the kitchen counter at night for charging. That's where they sleep. Heidi has also really led us in an effort to be outside. And with my boys, and my girls too, when they were younger, they've all enjoyed camping. My boys would go camping every single day if my schedule would allow. But as a family, we really try to be outside. And Heidi's led us in, I don't know if you've heard of 1,000 Hours Outside. Have you heard of that program?
I haven't. Sounds interesting.
Check it out. It's a national program and a challenge to say to families, spend 1,000 hours outside in a year. And do the breakdown on that. That's a lot of hours every day. It's a challenge that helps you enjoy the nature, and there are restorative benefits for just from being outside.
Yeah.
And certainly the family time spent together and the time off devices is all positive. So that's something that we embrace as well.
I think a camping trip this summer is in store, Bill.
100%.
with at least with those two little boys.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, 100%. Let's do that.
You've always been a well-read guy. I always remember you talking about books that have impacted you. It's been a while since I asked you the question. What are some of the books that you've read recently that have made an impact on you?
So recently I've been reading a lot of books about this space that I'm working in. One that's really poignant and always on top of my mind is called iGen, a researcher from the University of California at San Diego. And in this book, she really talks about this crisis that we've inadvertently started with our young people. She says, we're on the verge of the biggest mental health crisis our country has ever known. It's directly related to technology. And it's taking the humanity out of childhood, where so many of our kids are growing up with technology more than they are with people. And I know that sounds crazy, but look at the patterns of how much time kids spend on devices. We're naive to think that does not have an effect on the way our brains form, the way our social skills develop. It does. And this doctor, Jean Twenge, her name is, and she, has a very evidentiary-based approach to showing we have more mental health issues in this country now than we ever have. And if you look at the Center for Disease Control, that's borne out in skyrocketing suicide statistics among young people. The tragedy of that is unspeakable. And if this effort that we're involved in to provide kids and families with a better way to do technology, if we could save one life, it will be worth it. Our goal is to touch millions of lives and help families to get a better grasp on this.
Did she talk about, I think we kind of know what the negatives of the social media and technology world we're living in. I mean, it creates a false sense of reality because everyone's posting what they want you to see, right?
Right.
Certainly there's some predatory things that are scary out there, but I think it's the general population. It's more this false sense of what reality is and who I'm supposed to be. And I'm judging myself against the outside world. And I'm not actually seeing that world the way it is, but the way they're portraying it. Is there any conversation that you've had or that, some of these you've read have had about what are the positive things that are happening with technology, right? Because there is certainly a lot of positive.
Oh, for sure.
So I think if you can direct your kids towards the positive, right? Like so it's access to these books, to a podcast like the one we're on. There's some really amazing things. We just got to get our kids to understand the difference. That's really, in my mind, what it comes down to is, let's make a checklist. These are the things that are going to make you look at the world in a way that isn't reality. And here's some things you could do in technology that are just going to be amazing for you and, grow yourself, kind of a thing.
Yeah, there's no question. We actually wrote a blog post about this on our website, and talked about the upsides, because it's easy to get into that technology is bad, technology is dangerous. And there is a lot of truth to a lot of aspects of that. But we try not to just be this fear voice, because there's so much good that technology can do. I had one of these experiences recently, during the pandemic, when I was working from home and, locked up in my home office all day, every day. I came up at one point and my wife had the kids in the living room and they were having a live guided tour of Jamestown from a docent at Jamestown who had been there for 20 years. And it was so good that I ended up sitting down and watching this thing because it was riveting. And it wrapped up. And I said, kids, this was a perfect example of what technology, can be used for. It expands our reach. It gives us new opportunities. It helps, focused on the right content, can influence our thinking and help us see new ideas. So super positive example. In my family, another obvious positive example, my family's in Canada. I came out here almost 30 years ago. And so my kids, their connections with their cousins in Canada and with my parents, without technology, it wouldn't have been the same. So that's an obvious one, but, can't be overstated. It's just in the pursuit of those positive things, let's make sure that we're filtering out the negative things.
Right.
And at least allowing kids to take on the additional functions and responsibilities as the need truly warrants, and as their brains are developed enough to deal with, I do know how to react if I get some inappropriate content. I do know how to react or identify someone who might be predatory. And frankly, in regard to the social media stuff, I know the difference between what's a fake narrative and what's reality. And I can deal with this fear of missing out culture that we live in. And technology is not bad. It just needs to be a graduated introduction.
That's the key right there, because all of us are in this position where we have to introduce technology for our kids to be able to learn how to use it, but we have to also watch them fail at it a little bit, but not so much that it's a detrimental failure. Finding that balance is a really difficult thing to find because you don't want your kids to go down a path where, they get addicted to a certain type of content or a certain type of a habit of staying in touch with friends. But you also want to be there. You want them to be under the umbrella of having a family, having a coach, having a mentor to help them learn how to use that technology. And that balance is just extremely difficult to find.
It's interesting that you say that, because I've talked to a few families, that have used another solution that's just completely locked down to talk and text. It literally does nothing else. And I've seen them, providing that to their 17-year-old boys. And I've called them out and I've said, if you think your son is not going to be addicted to pornography 2 weeks after he leaves home, you're wrong. He's got to learn discipline. He's got to have the opportunities to learn how to use technology effectively. And by just bubble wrapping, that's not a great long-term solution.
Oh, my wife's always telling me that. She's like, Cory, we have to walk them into this because they can't just leave the house and then they're all in. You'll be in big trouble if that happens. You have to walk them into technology, because by the time they leave, they're going to have access to everything, right? There's not a big difference, but a lot of time it does not pass between 15 and 18. That's just a couple of years. Anyway, well, I wanted to ask you, some of the best podcasts we have are when we talk about either lessons learned or hardest parts of being a dad, like, so if you look back on your life as a father, what are some of those moments where you went, oh man, this was a defining moment in our lives, or this is a lesson learned that I had that I wish I would have done different? Give me something in that space.
I've actually had a lot of that on my mind recently with our oldest daughter getting ready to leave home. She's going through that process right now of getting all her university applications back and deciding, what the next chapter is. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about my relationship with Becca. What are the things that I could say, hey, I think I did that at least okay. In other areas where I think, oh my goodness, if I had that one to do over again, I would. I've always tried to spend time with my kids. That's always been of the utmost importance to me. So no regrets in that case. But I think when I was younger, I took things way too seriously and got impatient too much. I mean, I think of specific examples that bring tears to my eyes where I've gone back and apologized to some of my kids. There was a Christmas Eve. We had just lost a baby. We lost our first boy was stillborn right before his due date. And that was right before Christmas that we lost this little guy. And Heidi was beside herself with grief. And so I was trying to keep a strong face and make Christmas happen for my other 3 kids. And Christmas Eve, the kids were going to bed and my oldest daughter was just so excited. So excited and bouncing off the walls. And amid all the stress of having lost this child, like literally we buried him on the 23rd of December. And I snapped. And got after Becca for not going to bed on Christmas Eve. And it still just kills me inside. And I think I apologize every Christmas Eve to her. And she's like, Dad, let it go. I don't even remember. But I do. And that's just a very poignant example. But I think, if I had it to do over again, there's always this fine balance, right? You want to be friends with your kids, but you've got to be a parent first. And I think it's possible to do both. I've always thought that. As a parent, you've got to provide boundaries. You've got to provide, more than anything, an example. Those boundaries have to come with consequences. And sometimes parents get into this trap of feeling like, I can't be the parent and have boundaries, or I'm going to destroy that friendship. I don't think that's true. I think you can have, hey, a family culture, and this is how we do things in our family. And I love you and I respect you, but this is how we do things in our family. When I was young, I would say I took myself too seriously. And there were things where I probably turned, the proverbial anthills into mountains when I didn't need to. That's when I would do over again.
I did the same thing. I still catch myself doing that, actually. Making too big of a deal, and then a couple hours later, okay. Even a couple hours, right? Okay. That was probably a little bit of an overreaction to the situation. So I think we've all been there.
There's a poem. I'm trying to remember the author. It shows up in How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. There's a poem that, about a dad who has reprimanded his son over and over and over again. And in a quiet moment is crushed as he realizes, wow, I've been too hard on this boy. And he goes in and kisses his son, while he's sleeping and says, son, tomorrow I'll remember that you're a boy and I'll be a better dad. That had a huge impact on me and helped me not take things as seriously as I did.
Yeah, that's a fantastic book. I had my 15-year-old just read that. And I had forgotten that poem was in there, though. That's a fantastic poem.
Yeah.
So there's 3 of us at the table, and all 3 of us have struggled with that same thing. As young dads, we took ourselves too seriously. And I think it's that stress of, I don't want to screw this up. This is like my first huge responsibility in life. I don't want to be a failure at it. And you take yourself so seriously that you end up doing things that you regret or that you learn from later in life. So if you're a young dad listening to the podcast, take it from 3 of us old guys. give yourself a little bit of a break, do your best, and don't take yourself so seriously that you can't enjoy the process of raising your kids.
Yeah,
So,
I think Bill said something good there where he said, be the parent first, but you can also be their friend. I think the key to that is, in my mind, is to have this idea of unconditional love, right? I think if I was a younger parent talking to myself, I would say, if you do everything with love, then you can have both, right? You can be the parent, but you're coming from a place of love.
100%. I had one of the pivotal lessons that I learned on fatherhood. It came from my wife's uncle. When we were newly married, before we had kids, we were at a family reunion. She's got a massive family. Like her mom it was a family of 12 kids, and they all had, wow, 8 or 10 kids. It's a huge family. And we were at this family reunion, and there was this one particular aunt and uncle whose kids were so happy and kind and polite, and and everyone is. They're this great family, but just this one group stood out to me. And I pulled the dad aside and I said, "Hey, you've got to tell me, what have you done? Because your kids, I'm watching them. They're wonderful." And he said, "For me, it comes down to one thing. I say yes as much as I can so that when I say no, it means something." And I took that to heart, and it really influenced my parenting style. My daughter, Becca, she'll be 18 and she's leaving home, at the end of the summer. And in 18 years, I have never had a shouting match with her. Not one. Literally not one. Part of that is just her personality. That's the way she came wired. When we have a disagreement, she doesn't shout at me. She comes to me with a very well thought out proposal, and like she needs to be an attorney, and but part of it is that she knows I love her unconditionally. I respect her fully and completely, and I have always tried to say yes, and she knows that when I say no, okay, there's clearly a line here. I'll follow that line.
That's good advice. That's a good story. I like that. I wish I would have done that better.
Yeah, that is great advice. That might be your wife's uncle's quote, might go on some type of a Gentleman Project social post or something this week. That would be great. You and I shared the story as I was starting the Gentleman Project and speaking with people about fatherhood. We sat at Snowbird once, and you told me the story about losing your little boy, and it impacted everybody so much. I remember everyone at the table had tears in their eyes, and you and I just sat there next to each other and just cried. And I think it was probably a little fresher in your life at that point, because this was probably 10 years ago almost. I've noticed that there's a lot of people that have dealt with that situation, and they kind of deal with it on their own or in their own community of people who have dealt with that. So I want to ask you a question. One, how did that impact your life? What did it do for your life? What blessings have you seen because of it? Because I know that you've taken it that direction. And what would you say to people to support people who have been through something like losing a child?
So statistically, it's a tough situation in terms of what happens to couples after losing a child. And we had a midwife who was helping with that pregnancy, a wonderful lady. She pulled Heidi and me aside the next morning, and she said, "I need you guys to make a promise to me that you will not let this tragedy affect your relationship." And I kind of looked at her like, "Well, of course not. Like, what are you talking about?" And she said 75% of couples that lose a baby like that end up in divorce. And which is, significantly higher than, the average for divorce. And so we made that commitment, that we would not, in our own grief, let that turn into anything negative with each other. For us, the timing of that, came on top of some other trials. I'd had a tough year. And when that happened in December, it was like, what else could go wrong in life? And for us, it meant really turning to our faith and trusting in our faith and finding peace, through our belief and turning to God. The impact of that, lasts to this day. This is 13 years later. I think that's important. Number one is, turn to your spouse. Don't let any negativity that arises from your grief fester and turn into a wedge in that relationship. Find your solace, find your coping through your spouse and through, and faith means different things to different people, but whatever faith you have, let that be a big part of your life.
Thanks for sharing that with us. It's a tender topic to talk about.
Certainly.
I was going to ask you, how did that affect the other kids? Was that a big effect on them, or were they too young to see that? How did that affect the overall family?
We actually had a pretty magical experience. I remember being in the hospital. A friend had come over while Heidi had to deliver this little boy that wasn't there. He was gone, but we had to go through labor and deliver his body. And a friend had come over, and I had to go talk to our other kids who were, they were expecting a baby to come home. So I excused myself for an hour. They were at a friend's place that, we're watching them. And as I'm driving over there, I'm saying this prayer, please God, help me understand how to talk to these little girls. And I remember taking them aside. The two older girls, our youngest was 18 months. She really didn't understand it all. But my two older girls, were 3 and 5, 3 and 6. And so I pulled them aside into another room in the house and explained, that Jack wasn't coming home, that he had gone to heaven. And my 3-year-old daughter got this incredible look of realization and understanding on her face. And she said, so what you're saying is that Jack was going to be our little brother, but instead he's going to be our big brother, and he'll be watching us. And I just lost it. I just lost it and looked heavenward and said, thank you. And Jack's always been a part of our family life. We talk about him. We celebrate his birthday every year. And, for years and years, if the girls were asked, how many kids are in your family? They always included him. I think it was a great experience from the perspective of learning something. It was a great experience for the girls to see, hey, you can have tough things happen. You can get through it. Their connection to faith was also strengthened.
That is a cool story.
Bill, thanks for sharing all of those things with us today. I think all of us can identify with a part of what you spoke to and spoke about today, and appreciate you sharing those parts of your fatherhood journey with us. At the end of every podcast, we always ask each guest that we interview what they think it means to be a gentleman. Would you like to answer that?
Absolutely. Makes me think of my dad. And I lost my dad this last year. And I had a twin sister growing up. Well, I still have a twin sister. But growing up with a twin sister, my dad just always talked to me about being a gentleman. It was something he talked about a lot. Would find every just common everyday opportunity to teach a principle about that. So some of the takeaways that I learned as a kid, that was taking care of my twin sister. Number one part of being a gentleman in our home was treating women with respect and kindness. Didn't matter if that was mom or sister or any woman, just to treat them with that kindness and respect. As I grew older, I've realized that it's women certainly, but it's everyone. A gentleman treats everyone with kindness and respect. A gentleman goes out of his way to make other people comfortable. A gentleman will sacrifice, to make sure that someone else is having a a good experience. I think in that process, a gentleman is a positive thinker. He lifts those around him. But it really comes down, kind of the core values of it for me have always been that kindness and respect and just goodness toward other people.
Great answer. Love it.
Thanks,
And
Bill.
Bill's always been a gentleman to me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Look him up.
Yep.
In the dictionary, there's a Bill. There's a Bill.
Bill
right
Brady.
there.
Man, the myth, the legend, and the gentleman.
Do you want to do an outro for Bill like you did an intro? The man, the myth, the legend, the gentleman, Bill Brady.
I mean, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to Mr. Bill Brady, the man, the myth, the legend. How was that?
the gentleman.
The
Guys,
gentleman.
thank you both. It's been great to be with you, and I sure appreciate everything that you're doing. And thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks for being with us.
If people want to know more about Bill's company, they can visit troomi.com, TROOMI.com. And I don't know that he'll send you a personal text when you do an order, but he did me. That's pretty cool. Thanks, Bill. We appreciate you, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, hop over to your favorite platform that you listen to podcasts and subscribe, drop us a rating and a review. We really, really appreciate it. That's something you can do to share the podcast with somebody else. We've always got social media posts as well that you can share and spread the love and the message that Bill gave us today. We appreciate everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore. Have a great day.